Some fathers get a phone call in the middle of the night that changes everything. I got 3 days of nothing, and that silence nearly destroyed me before my own sons ever said a word. You want to know what it feels like to love someone so much it becomes a disease? Let me tell you. It feels like standing in your kitchen at 2 in the morning staring at a phone that won't ring, convinced your own child is lying dead in a ditch somewhere in Florida. That was me, 52 years old, gripping a coffee mug so hard my knuckles went white, waiting for 2 grown men to pick up a phone. My name is Gary Cooper. I run Anvil Biomed out of Shaker Heights, Ohio, a company that calibrates and repairs the machines hospitals can't survive without. MRI units, surgical lasers, the stuff that beeps and hums and keeps people breathing. I built that business with my hands and my back, and I built it so my boys would never know what it felt like to go without. My father didn't get that chance. He shipped out when I was 7. He never came home. Nobody taught me how to throw a baseball. Nobody sat me down and told me I mattered. So when Harry was born, and then Darren 2 years later, I made myself a promise standing in that hospital hallway in Shaker Heights. These boys will never know that kind of empty. I kept that promise for 25 years, and then, on a Tuesday in late May, that promise turned into the worst 3 days of my life. Welcome to Dad's Raw Revenge. Get comfortable, and keep this in mind. The people in this story had every chance to do right. They just chose otherwise. Hit that like button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Trust me, you're going to love it here. It started with a letter. Boring, official, the kind of thing you'd skim over coffee and forget by lunch. Notice of lease renewal. Guarantor verification required. Harry's apartment. That gorgeous high-rise unit down in Brickell, the one with the wraparound balcony overlooking Biscayne Bay. I co-signed that lease 2 years back when he landed his first real job in Miami. I'm the guarantor. My name, my credit, my signature holding the whole thing up like a steel beam nobody sees. The renewal was due in 5 days. Before I signed off, I needed one quick answer from Harry. A detail about his income documentation the property manager wanted cleared up. Simple. One phone call. 30 seconds tops. I dialed him from my office, leaning back in my chair, half watching a technician recalibrate an ultrasound probe through the glass, straight to voicemail. Fine. He's probably in a meeting. I left a message. Hey, it's Dad. Got the lease renewal paperwork here. Need to verify something with you before I sign it. Call me back when you get a second. No big deal. I went back to work. By the next afternoon, nothing. I called again. Voicemail again. Now I'll admit, the first flicker of unease showed up right there. I know Harry hardly picks up sometimes when I call, but he doesn't ignore me for a full day. Never has. So I called Darren, figuring he'd know where his brother was. Maybe out at Kai's, on 8th eating Cuban food, or down at the marina. Voicemail. Both of them? Same day? I told myself it was nothing. Kids get busy. They forget. I left another message trying to keep my voice light. Guys, I really need to hear back from you. Harry's apartment, the renewal deadline's coming up fast. Just give me a call. Kate noticed something was off with me that night at dinner. My wife's known me for 28 years. She can read a shift in my face before I even feel it myself. You've barely touched your pierogies, she said, nodding at the plate Mrs. Dabrowski next door had dropped off that afternoon. What's going on with you? The boys aren't answering, I said. Either of them, since yesterday. She waved it off. They're busy, Gary. They're grown men. She was right. I knew she was right. So why did my stomach feel like it was folding in on itself? Day 3 is when it stopped being annoying and started being terrifying. The deadline on that lease was now 48 hours out. I called Harry 7 times that day. 7. I called Darren 5 times. Every single call died in a voicemail box. I stopped eating. I stopped sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw car wrecks. I saw 2 Florida State troopers standing on my porch with their hats in their hands, and I swear to God I could hear the words before they even said them. You've already lost a father once, Gary. You know exactly how fast this world can take someone from you. You know how it happens. Quiet, sudden, and nobody warns you first. That night, I sat at the edge of the bed at 1 a.m., phone in my hand, thumb hovering over Harry's name for the 100th time. Kate sat up behind me. Gary, come to bed. Something's wrong, Kate. My voice cracked in a way I hadn't heard from myself since my own father's funeral. 3 days, neither one of them. That's not busy. That's not normal. Maybe they're together. Maybe their phones died. Both phones? For 3 straight days, I turned to look at her and I could see it land on her face too, that same cold drop in the stomach. "Pack a bag," I said. "We're flying out there. Something is wrong. I can feel it." She didn't argue with me. That's the thing about 28 years of knowing each other. You learn which fights are worth having, and which ones you just get up and pack a bag for. We booked the first flight out of Hopkins the next morning. I remember standing at the gate, watching the Cleveland skyline shrink behind the window, and thinking, this might be the worst decision I've ever made, or it might save their lives. I have no idea which. Kate held my hand the entire flight. Neither of us said much. "What do you say? Hope our sons aren't dead" doesn't exactly make for good small talk with the flight attendant handing out pretzels. I kept running the scenarios in my head like some sick highlight reel. A car accident on I-95. A break-in at the apartment. Darren, always the reckless one on that motorcycle he swore he'd sold. I pictured every version of tragedy a father's brain can invent at 30,000 feet, and none of them prepared me for what was actually waiting behind that door. We landed in Miami just after 2 in the afternoon. The heat hit us like a wall the second we stepped off the plane. That thick, wet Florida heat that Ohio people never fully get used to, no matter how many trips we make down there. I rented a Lincoln Navigator at the counter, tossed our one bag in the back, and pointed us toward Brickell. The whole drive down, Kate kept saying the same thing on a loop, like she was trying to convince herself. "They're fine. They're probably just fine, Gary. There's probably some boring explanation." "Then why won't they pick up the phone?" I said, gripping the wheel tighter than I needed to. 3 days, Kate. 14 calls between the two of us. Not one text back. Not one. She went quiet after that. I think some part of her knew, the same way some part of me knew, that boring explanation wasn't what waited for us on the other side of that building. Harry's building rose up out of the Brickell skyline like something out of a magazine. Glass, chrome. 30 stories of the kind of wealth that makes a Cleveland guy feel a little out of place in his own rental car. I pulled up to valet, and even that felt wrong somehow, dropping off a Navigator in a line of Porsches and Mercedes like I was crashing somebody else's life. We rode the elevator up to the 14th floor in silence. My hand was actually shaking when I raised it to knock. 25 years of fatherhood, and I was standing outside my own son's door like a man about to identify a body, and that's when I heard it. Music. Laughter. Loud, easy, celebratory laughter. The kind you don't hear in hospitals or morgues. Balloons taped in a cluster right beside the doorframe, bobbing gently every time someone inside walked past a vent. That's not the sound of tragedy, I thought, and for 1/2 second relief flooded through me so hard my knees nearly buckled. Thank God. Thank God they're okay. I knocked. The music dipped. Footsteps. The latch clicked, and the door swung open to reveal my oldest son, Harry, drink in hand, a wide grin frozen halfway between surprised and something far colder. Something I hadn't seen on his face since he was a teenager caught sneaking in past curfew. That grin didn't stay confused for long. It curdled into something else entirely. And in that half second before he opened his mouth, some part of me, the part that had spent 3 sleepless nights, terrified my son was dying somewhere, already knew. I hadn't flown 1,000 miles to save my boys from tragedy. I had flown 1,000 miles straight into an ambush I never saw coming. You ever have a moment where your whole body knows something terrible is about to happen half a second before your brain catches up? That's exactly where I was standing. 14th floor. Brickell. My hand still hovering near the doorframe like I could somehow push the moment back through the door and undo it. Harry stood there in the frame, drink sweating in his hand, and that grin on his face didn't just fade. It curdled, like milk left out in that Florida heat too long. "What are you guys doing here? Not Dad? Not Mom? Not even is everything okay? What are you guys doing here?" Like we were a couple of door-to-door salesmen he'd have to figure out how to get rid of. I tried to keep my voice steady, even though my whole chest felt like it was folding in on itself. "I have been calling," I said. "You didn't answer. I thought something happened to you." Kate pushed past me a step, hands flying up to her mouth, and for 1 second, just one, I watched 25 years of motherhood pour out of her all at once. "Oh, thank God," she gasped. "Son, you're okay. We've been calling for 3 days straight. We were sick with worry. We thought something terrible." Harry cut her off before she even finished the sentence. He rolled his eyes. Not a small eye roll either. A full, dramatic, exhausted. I can't believe I have to deal with this eye roll. The kind children give you when you ask them to take out the trash. We didn't answer because we didn't want to talk to you. His voice came out sharp, flat, final. Stop calling us. We have our own lives. You're suffocating us. Just stay on your own. Stay on your own. 4 words. I've been hit by a lot of things in my life. A garage door once, a rogue MRI cart that got away from a technician, my own father's absence for 45 straight years. None of it landed the way those 3 words landed. I stood there in the hallway, balloons bobbing gently against the doorframe behind Harry's head, like the whole building was mocking me, and I genuinely did not know what to say. 25 years, every game, every scraped knee, every 2 a.m. fever, and this is the return on investment. Before I could even find words, a woman stepped up beside Harry. Young, pretty, holding a glass of something pink and bubbly, her whole posture radiating a kind of smug exhaustion I'd only ever seen on reality TV. Honestly, she said, crossing her arms, it's too much. Do you guys ever stop hovering? Kate blinked at her, completely lost. I'm sorry, who are you? The girl's smile widened. She raised her left hand, slow, deliberate, like she was presenting evidence in a courtroom. A ring caught the hallway light and threw it right back in our faces. I'm Haley, she said, his fiancée, and today is our engagement party, which you are currently ruining by showing up uninvited. Uninvited. Ruining. I heard the words land, but for a second they didn't fully register, like my brain refused delivery on a package it knew would hurt too much to open. Our son. Engaged. And we found out about it standing in a hallway, being told we were ruining it. 28 years of marriage, and I have never once seen Kate look the way she looked in that moment, like someone had reached into her chest with a bare hand. I want to pause right here, because this is the part where a lot of people who've never lived it, would say, Gary, just walk away, don't make a scene. And believe me, some part of me was already halfway to the elevator in my head. But another part of me, the part that flew 1,000 miles because I genuinely believed my sons might be in danger somewhere, that part needed to understand. How does a father go from he's calling because he loves us to he's suffocating us without a single conversation in between? I found out real quick. That was the moment that broke me. I'd tell Kate later that night on the plane. Not the insults. Not the entitlement. Not even that girl's smug little smile. It was knowing they saw my name on their phones. They saw me calling. They knew I was worried sick. And they chose to let me suffer for 3 straight days. That's not independence. That's cruelty with a return address. But that came later. Right there in the hallway, all I had was a mouth that had gone dry and a wife quietly falling apart beside me. Behind that heartbreak, though, there was something else. Something Kate hadn't even said out loud yet, but I knew exactly what she was thinking, because I was thinking it too. Back home, sitting in our fireproof safe, was her grandmother's antique ring. 20 years she'd kept that thing polished, wrapped in the same faded blue cloth, dreaming about the day she'd slide it onto the finger of whatever woman our son chose to marry. And instead, she was standing in a hallway in Brickell, being treated like an intruder at a party, celebrating a ring that wasn't even hers to give. Darren appeared in the doorway right about then, holding a tray of what smelled like mojo pork and fried plantains, and groaned the second he saw us. Actually groaned like we were a chore he thought he'd finished. Are you serious right now? He set the tray down on a side table hard enough to rattle the plates. You guys just couldn't let us have this one day, could you? I felt something steady itself inside me right then. Fear was turning into something else. I don't know if it was anger yet. Maybe just clarity. Son, I said, keeping my voice level, I didn't come here to ruin anything. Your landlord sent an urgent notice. Your lease renewal deadline is tomorrow. And because I'm the primary guarantor, I needed to verify a quick detail before signing it, so you don't lose this place. I called your brother, then I called you, and neither of you answered for 3 days. Darren let out this laugh, short, mocking, the kind of laugh that has no actual humor in it, just contempt wearing humor's jacket. Oh, here we go again, the savior complex. He shook his head slow, like he was talking to a child instead of the man who'd been paying his rent. You think because you co-signed a stupid piece of paper you get to track our every move? This is exactly why we both chose colleges thousands of miles from home. We literally picked our schools just to get away from your constant suffocating help. Thousands of miles. On purpose. To get away from me. I flew 1,000 miles because I loved them too much to sit still. They moved 1,000 miles because they loved me too little to stay close. Harry nodded along like his brother had just delivered some kind of TED talk, then leaned against the door frame, arms crossed, drink still in hand. Exactly, he said. You always use money and fixing things just to keep tabs on us and feel important. I pay my own rent now with my own job. I don't need you hovering over me acting like a hero. He paused, and here's the part that really cracked something open in my chest. We saw your calls. We purposefully didn't answer. We wanted to see how long it would take for you to finally get the hint and stay on your own. Purposefully. Not we were busy. Not our phones died. Purposefully. For 3 days I sat awake picturing every possible danger they could be in the entire time. My sons were sitting somewhere watching my name light up their screens, and deciding, on purpose, to let their own father suffer, just to teach him a lesson. Haley tossed her hair back, clearly bored of the whole exchange by now. Yeah, she said, we're trying to celebrate our future with people who actually matter. We don't need your old-school drama here. She gestured vaguely down the hall, toward the elevator like she was shooing off a delivery driver. Please leave. Please leave. In my own son's doorway. By a woman I'd met 4 minutes ago. Please leave. I want you to understand something about me, because it matters for everything that comes after this moment. I didn't yell. I've thought about that a lot since. Whether I should have raised my voice, whether some part of them needed to see me break the way they'd just broken their mother. But that's not who I am. My own father never got the chance to teach me how to handle a moment like that, so I had to figure it out myself. Standing right there in that hallway with balloons bobbing behind my son's head, like some cruel party decoration mocking the whole thing. I looked at the 2 boys I had poured my entire life into, the boys I'd vowed to protect the second I held them, because I knew exactly what it felt like to grow up without someone protecting you. They stood there in a lifestyle my signature and my credit had built, the apartment, the cars, every safety net under their feet, completely blind to it, treating their own mother like something to be swept off the doorstep. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just reached over, gently took my sobbing wife's hand, and turned toward the elevator. Behind us, I heard Haley mutter something to Harry. I didn't catch the words, and honestly, I didn't need to. The tone said enough. They wanted to be on their own. And tomorrow, they were going to get exactly what they asked for. If you have been listening for a while, drop your thoughts in the comments, hit the like button while you're at it, and be sure you're subscribed. The elevator ride down felt longer than the entire flight from Cleveland. Kate stood beside me, silent, staring at the mirrored doors, tears running steady down her face without a single sound coming out of her. I've seen my wife cry plenty of times in 28 years. At her mother's funeral, at both boys' graduations, once during a Hallmark commercial that I still tease her about. But I had never seen her cry like that, silent, hollow, like something inside her had simply stopped working. We didn't talk in the lobby. We didn't talk in the navigator on the way to the airport, even though I kept glancing over, waiting for her to say something, anything, just so I'd know she was still in there. She finally spoke somewhere around the on-ramp for the causeway, staring out at the water like it might have an answer for her. 20 years, she said quietly. I kept that ring polished for 20 years, Gary. I didn't ask which ring. I already knew. I used to imagine the day I'd give it to her, she went on, voice cracking. Whoever he chose. I imagined telling her the story behind it, my grandmother, coming over from Poland with nothing but that ring sewn into the lining of her coat. I don't know what I imagined. Not that. Her hands were shaking in her lap. Not being told I'm ruining a party I didn't even know was happening. What do you say to that? What is there to say? I reached over and took her hand off her lap, held it the rest of the drive, and neither of us said another word until we were sitting at the gate waiting to board. The flight home was the quietest 2 hours of my life, and I've sat through some quiet hours. Kate stared out the window the entire time, watching Florida shrink and disappear beneath the clouds, tears slipping down every few minutes like her body had simply given up trying to stop them. I held her hand and said nothing. What was there to say? It'll be fine? It wasn't fine. They didn't mean it. They meant every word. They'd told us themselves they'd planned it, watched the calls come in, and chose silence on purpose. They're just going through a phase? 25 and 22 years old is not a phase. That's a grown man's decision, made in full daylight, with a fiancé cheering him on. I just held her hand and let the silence say what neither of us had the strength to say out loud yet. Somewhere over Georgia, staring at the seat back in front of me, something shifted inside my chest. Quiet, but permanent. Like a door closing somewhere deep in a house you thought you knew every room of. I gave them everything I never had. Every game, every scraped knee, every ounce of protection a boy without a father spends his whole life dreaming about giving his own kids someday. And somehow, in giving them all of that, I built two men who look at me like I'm the villain in their story. 25 years, and this is the return. By the time we touched down in Cleveland, something in me had already made a decision, even though I didn't have the words for it yet. I just knew the man walking off that plane wasn't the same one who'd boarded terrified for his son's lives a few hours earlier. That man was gone, and whatever was left of him was about to make a phone call his sons would remember for the rest of their lives. They wanted to be left alone, so I left them alone, legally, financially, and completely. And by the time they figured out what that actually meant, it was already too late to undo it. You know what nobody tells you about heartbreak? It doesn't announce itself right away. It waits. It lets you walk through your own front door first. Lets you set your bags down, lets you think for one merciful second that maybe the worst of it is behind you. And then it takes your wife's legs right out from under her. We walked into our house in Shaker Heights a little after 10 that night, and the silence hit us different than it ever had before. 28 years in that house. Countless nights coming home from Little League games, from school plays, from every ordinary moment that used to fill these rooms with noise. That night, the quiet felt like it had teeth. Kate made it 2 steps past the front hall before her knees just gave out. She went down onto the living room floor, right there on the rug her mother had given us as a wedding gift, and she cried the way you cry when someone dies, not the composed, dignified crying you do in a hallway in front of strangers. The real thing. The kind that comes from somewhere underneath your ribs. I stood there for a second just watching her, and something in my chest cracked clean open. 28 years of marriage, and I had never once felt this helpless. I got down on the floor with her, didn't say anything smart, didn't try to fix it, which, if you know me, is a small miracle in itself, because fixing things is the only language I've ever really known how to speak. I just held her while she cried into my shoulder, and I let myself ask the question that had been chasing me since we left. Where did we go wrong? I gave them everything I never had, I said quietly, more to myself than to her. I was there for every moment. I was the father I always wished for. And somehow, in doing that, I turned them into people who look at me like I'm the enemy. Kate lifted her head, eyes red and swollen, and said the only thing that made any sense that whole night. No, Gary, you didn't turn them into anything. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. They did that themselves. You just handed them a life they never had to work for. And people who never work for something never learn to be grateful for it. I held my wife on that living room floor until almost midnight, and somewhere in there I made myself a promise. The only person who had stood by me through every single version of my life, good, bad, terrified, exhausted, was lying right there in my arms. My boys had their own lives now. They'd made that painfully, deliberately clear. So I decided right then, I was going to honor that wish, and I was going to spend whatever time I had left loving the one person who had actually earned it. We didn't sleep much that night. We talked, really talked, the kind of conversation 28 years of marriage lets you have without needing to explain half of it. We agreed on one thing above everything else. Whatever happened next, we'd move together. No solo decisions. No guilt trips down memory lane that would soften either of us at the wrong moment. By sunrise, we were aligned. And Gary Cooper aligned with his wife is not a man you want standing between you and a phone. I called my lawyer, Paul Hopper, at exactly 8:02 a.m. He picked up on the second ring. Man's been handling Anvil Biomed's contracts for 15 years. He knows when I'm calling about business, and when I'm calling about something else entirely. This was clearly something else. Gary, he said, you sound like a man who didn't sleep. I need you to pull my name off Harry's lease guarantee, I said. Today, before the renewal window closes. There was a pause on the line. The kind of pause a good lawyer gives you when he wants to make sure you're not about to do something you'll regret by lunchtime. You sure about that? Once that renewal lapses without your backing, the property management system is going to flag it automatically. No warning period. No grace window on a place like that. I've never been more sure of anything, I said. Paul didn't argue further. By 9:15, the withdrawal was filed. By noon, it was processed. The renewal deadline came and went at midnight, with no signature attached to it. Because for the first time in 2 years, there was no Gary Cooper standing behind that lease like an invisible steel beam. Nobody ever thanks. They wanted to prove they didn't need me hovering over their lives. I decided to give them the closest thing to proof a man in my position could offer. I didn't hear anything for 2 days, which frankly felt almost funny given everything that had just happened. The same silence that had nearly destroyed me a week earlier now felt like the most peaceful 2 days I'd had in months. The call came on a Thursday afternoon. I was in my office, reviewing a service contract renewal with a hospital network out in Akron, when my phone buzzed with Harry's name on the screen. I let it ring twice before I picked up. Dad. His voice came out tight, clipped, the sound of a man trying very hard to sound calm and failing. Dad, there's some kind of mistake with the lease. The building manager says the renewal didn't go through because there's no guarantor. They just served us an official notice to vacate, and they're hitting us with a non-compliance penalty that doubles our rent for the next 7 days until we're out. There's no mistake, son, I said, keeping my voice level almost gentle. I withdrew as guarantor 2 days ago. Dead silence on the line. You what? Dad, why would you do that? You know I can't qualify on my own income yet. If they file an official eviction lawsuit, it goes on my public record. My credit will be destroyed. Haley and I won't be able to rent a doghouse in this city. You told me to stay on my own, I said. So I am. Dad, please, you have to call them back. Tell them it was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake, Harry. I'll talk to you soon. I hung up. They didn't wait for a sheriff to throw them out. They couldn't afford to have a legal eviction ruin their names. The actual exit happened fast, quiet, and procedural. I heard the details later, secondhand, through a mutual friend of Darren's. Harry and Haley spent 48 straight hours frantically throwing clothes into garbage bags. Security didn't force them out. Security just watched them pack. Standing by the elevator while Harry wheeled his own life out of that luxury high-rise on a luggage cart, passing right through the same lobby where, 2 weeks earlier, they'd told his own mother she was ruining their engagement party. There is a quiet clarity in watching natural consequences finally arrive at a door that had been propped open by my signature for far too long. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about being a fixer your whole life. The moment you stop fixing, the world doesn't collapse. It just becomes honest again. I didn't stop there either. Over the following week, I looked at every other financial thread tying my name to theirs. You can't just cross your name off a co-signed loan with a pen, but you can force the bank's hand. I called our account manager at the bank that held Harry's side business line of credit, which was secured by my company's assets. I officially revoked the authorization for him to use my collateral. The bank immediately froze his business draw and issued a demand for him to find new security within 30 days. Next, I called the lender on Darren's Jeep. I informed them in writing that as cosigner I was actively refusing to cover any future delinquencies. Since Darren's credit score alone was a disaster, the bank flagged the loan as high risk and demanded an immediate restructure. I didn't do it with anger. I just let the financial institutions do what they do best. Look at my son's actual worth without my shadow covering them. They asked to be on their own. I was just letting the banks show them exactly what that meant. They showed up on our porch about 3 weeks later. They didn't have a choice. Miami had chewed them up and spit them out the second my money vanished. Harry's business venture collapsed without the line of credit, and with no luxury high-rise to live in, they had to pack whatever fit into a budget rental box truck and drive 18 hours straight back to Ohio to survive. They didn't call first. They just pulled that yellow rental truck right up to our curb in Shaker Heights, looking like two ghosts of the successful men they thought they were. Darren was the one doing the knocking, hard and fast, his face pale and furious, pounding on the door like it owed him an apology. I opened it, let them in, sat them down in the living room, same room Kate had collapsed in weeks earlier, and let them say whatever they'd driven 18 hours straight from Miami to say. Harry went first, and he was crying before he even got through the doorway. Real tears this time, not performance. Though it took me a minute to remember that real tears don't automatically mean real accountability. How could you do this to us? His voice broke on every other word. We're your family. You're ruining our lives over a small argument, and you know I'm getting married soon. Small argument? I asked. My voice was entirely empty of emotion. You watched your mother and me call you for 3 days straight while we were sick with worry, Harry. You ignored us on purpose to teach me a lesson. Now the world is teaching you one. Harry's face shifted then, grief curdling fast into something uglier, a desperate panic. You're just a control freak who wants to see us fail, he screamed, his voice echoing off the hardwood. You've always been like this. You can't stand that we don't need you anymore. This is a sick revenge plot because we didn't invite you to a party. I didn't flinch. I don't want to see you fail, son. But you told me you didn't need me hovering over you acting like a hero. I'm just honoring your wish. If you truly don't need me, then you don't need my name on your apartment. You don't need my collateral for your business. And you don't need my signature on your debt. That's not revenge. That's adulthood. Harry's jaw tightened. I watched him search for another angle, the way a man searches his pockets for keys he already knows aren't there. Mom would never have let this happen, he said, desperate now, pivoting hard. You're doing this behind her back, aren't you? You're punishing us because you're bitter. That's when Kate stepped into the room from the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, voice steady in a way I hadn't heard from her since before that hallway in Brickell. Your dad and I are on the same page, she said, firm, solid, not a single crack in it. We talked about this together. We both agreed to honor your wish to be left alone. Darren, who'd been quiet up to that point, finally cracked. Mom, you can't be serious. I stood up from my chair, walked over and put my hand gently on Kate's shoulder. So here we are, I said. We're leaving you alone. Good luck. I watched something in both of their faces finally understand, really understand, that this wasn't a phase, wasn't a bluff, wasn't a father who'd cave the second his sons cried hard enough in his living room. I listened to them cry and blame me for their own mess. They tried to make me feel guilty for their eviction, for their financial collapse, for every choice they themselves had made. But I felt nothing but clarity. These were the same boys who stood in a doorway and told me I was suffocating them. These were the same boys who broke their mother's heart without so much as a flinch. They didn't want my help when I was offering it freely. They just wanted someone to blame once they realized they couldn't do it alone. They left that night without another word. I heard the car door slam outside, heard the engine fade down the street, and Kate and I stood in that living room, in a silence that, for the first time in weeks, didn't feel like grief. It felt like peace. I went to see Paul Hopper again the following week, and this time it wasn't about Elise. I want to rewrite the trust, I told him, sliding my coffee aside to make room for the folder he'd brought. Completely. He looked up at me over his glasses, the same careful look he'd given me the day I pulled Harry's guarantee. How completely? If I die first, everything goes to Kate. If she dies first, everything comes to me. And if we're both gone, I paused, and for the first time in weeks I felt something settle in my chest instead of tear through it. $0 go to the boys. And instead, there are charities that fund scholarships for kids of fallen military veterans, I said. Kids whose fathers shipped out and never came home. Kids who'd give anything just to have a father call them once and actually mean it. That's where it goes. All of it. Paul didn't ask me to reconsider. He just nodded, made the note, and got to work. My own father was taken from me by a deployment that never ended the way it was supposed to. I grew up without him, and I swore my children would never know that particular kind of ache. And somehow, in giving them everything I never had, I raised two boys who took a loving father completely for granted. My boys don't need my money. They've made that abundantly clear. But there are kids out there right now, real kids, in real houses, with a folded flag on a mantle somewhere, who would trade almost anything for a father to call and ask how their day went. My legacy isn't going to the sons who pushed me out of a doorway in Miami. It's going to the children who'd actually give anything to have a father worth calling. Months passed after that. The calls from Harry and Darren slowed, then stopped altogether. I heard through an old family friend that they'd moved into a smaller place together somewhere outside the city. No more Brickell views, no more balcony over Biscayne Bay. Struggling, apparently. Learning the hard way what a monthly budget actually looks like when your name isn't backed by somebody else's signature. I won't lie and tell you it didn't sting to hear that. It did. Some nights it still does. But every time that ache creeps in, I remember the hallway. I remember stay on your own. I remember watching my wife's face fall apart over a ring that never got its moment. And the ache settles right back down where it belongs. Kate and I sit out on our back porch most evenings now, right around sunset, coffee in hand, watching the sky do its slow fade over the same Shaker Heights backyard, where two boys once learned to ride bikes I'd stayed up half the night assembling. She reached over one evening not too long ago and put her hand on mine, the way she's done 1,000 times over. 28 years. And I looked at her and realized something simple and true. My father died when I was 7. I spent my whole life trying to be the man he never got the chance to become. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that the only person I truly needed to protect was the woman sitting right beside me the entire time. My boys have their own lives now. They made that crystal clear standing in a doorway in Miami. And my wife and I, we have each other. And that, it turns out, is more than enough. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Let me know where you're watching from. I will see you on the next one.